And when we can do all these things in the context of connection and a secure attachment relationship, we're not only protecting our kids from harm, but we're building up their emotional resiliency as well. We can actually be a buffer and also strengthen them to withstand the worst effects of pain. Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your stepfamily from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of stepfamily life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Well, hey there. Welcome to another episode here on the Blended Family Coaching Show. We're very excited to be joining you today and continuing the conversation that we had last week. You know, we know that it takes time to set aside and join us here every week, and we so appreciate the way that you keep showing up, because what that tells us is that you have hope.
Yeah.
And that's something that we really enjoy casting, is like a vision and hope for a future, and really being able to love each other, love our kids well in the midst of some sometimes really crazy dynamics.
Yeah, it
in
gets
blended family
messy.
life. Absolutely. So thank you so much for just setting that time aside and joining us here for your own benefit and for the long-term benefit of your blended family. Well, what do you say we hop into the rest of the conversation that we started last week, hon?
Yeah, so last week we challenged you to consider this paradigm shift. So rather than treating parenting as a job, we invited you to embrace parenting as a journey. So instead of asking yourself, oh, what am I supposed to do in this situation with this child? We explored how to focus more on asking, how shall I be with this child? And we talked about why it's more important to be present than perfect when it comes to raising healthy, resilient, and secure kids.
Yeah, I mean, I really love that thought of how shall I be with this child, because what comes out is really evident of what's going on inside. So if I start with what's going on inside, then that's going to give me a better chance for what comes out to be what I really want it to be.
How you show up, you mean?
Absolutely. And remember that the goal is not about parenting perfection.
Right.
Instead, the goal is to recognize your own tendencies and those typical responses. That's that, how shall I be, what's going on inside. And then to develop the flexibility and the openness to move in different directions when your reactions and responses don't seem to be helping your child.
Yeah.
I've been in lots of situations where I'm thinking, man, I don't think I'm helping here. So today we're just continuing this conversation around what a relationship-focused view of parenting really looks like. That way we can experience deeper connections with our kids and our stepkids.
Absolutely. And we've been sharing practical insights and wisdom from the book, The 6 Needs of Every Child by Jeffrey and Amy Ulrich. And they draw on psychological research and neuroscience with these 6 needs that form the foundation of thriving parent-child connections. Now, last time we explored 3 of the 6 needs, which were delight, support, and boundaries. And if you missed that, you might want to go back and catch episode 142 before you continue with this episode. And you can simply click the link in the show notes to check that out.
Yeah, and you certainly want to do that so you're not feeling lost in our discussion today as we explore the other 3 needs, which are comfort, equipping, and protection. But before we hop into all that, it would be really helpful to do a super quick recap of attachment theory, because understanding that's going to help you fully grasp the importance of all 6 of these needs and why the perspective and practical tools that the Ulrichs bring in their book can be so powerful for parents and step-parents. So to summarize over 50 years of attachment-related research, we can say that having a secure attachment relationship helps our kids' development in 3 important ways. 1, it equips them to regulate their own emotions. 2, it gives them a sense of who they are and the confidence to try new things. Mm-hmm. And then third, it protects them from major mental and physical health problems later in life.
Yeah. And psychologist John Bowlby identified that all humans are born with two complementary instincts that shape development. Mm-hmm. The instinct to draw near to trusted caregivers for safety and comfort under distress, and the instincts to go out and explore and master the world around them when the coast is clear. Mm-hmm. So these two instincts maintain a balance between safety and adventure, preservation and growth.
Right, and these instincts within each child are paired with a parent's natural instincts to monitor and intervene on behalf of their child as the situation demands. Mm-hmm. So these instincts actually bind us to one another.
Exactly. Our children's complementary instincts for exploration and refuge seeking show themselves over and over again as they grow. Mm-hmm. And this is really important for us to understand because, as the Ulrichs put it, forget parenting formulas. It's attachment that matters.
Yeah.
Parents and step-parents who enter the attachment relationship and meet their children's needs consistently, not perfectly, but consistently, raise children who are more secure and competent in the world.
Yeah, and that's something we all want, right? Mm-hmm. And we all want a deeper connection with our kids and stepkids too. So last week in episode 142, we talked about practical ways to simply be present and meet our kids' and stepkids' needs around the instinct of exploration. Those were delight, support, and boundaries. Mm-hmm. We just mentioned those. But today, we're going to be exploring the three needs which relate to the instinct of refuge seeking. So let's get started with the first one that we want to talk about, and that's the need for protection.
Okay, well, protection is a basic need for human beings. And there will be times when we must draw our children close and protect them from harm. Mm-hmm. Protection is aware of the reality that there are genuine threats in the world that our kids will need our help to navigate. Everything from, speeding vehicles in the crosswalk to bullies on the school bus to a family member who is maybe unwell or unstable, family acquaintance type person. Now, in this day and age, we're constantly bombarded with tragic stories on the news and warnings of danger to our children. And honestly, those things really do tend to trigger me, and they move me toward overprotection of my kids. Yeah. I can get really fearful and overly focused on all the bad things that could happen. And I imagine all the dangerous and suspicious people out there lurking in the world who might want to hurt my kids.
Yeah, honey, I'd say you tend to lean a little bit toward overprotection.
Yeah.
And I think that might be common for a lot of parents. It's not just you, right?
Right.
But according to Jeffrey Ulrich, the challenge in meeting this need is trying to find that balance between too much and too little protection, and whether what they're experiencing is actually a danger to be protected from, or if it's simply an obstacle for them to maneuver, right? So he goes on to ask this question. Hey, is the boulder up ahead an exciting challenge that will strengthen and grow your child when she climbs it? Or is it more likely to fall over and crush her? Like each time we're looking at this, we kind of need to ask that type of question.
Right.
And you're only going to know the answer to that question by knowing your child well enough to have a sense of what is or isn't a true danger on the path that they happen to be on.
Right. There is definitely a risk when we're focused on overprotection. And that's why I'm so thankful I have you, honey, and this awesome book to help me process through my fears and land on a more balanced place. Because how we choose to navigate the need for protection will have consequences for our kids' future health and how they function in the world.
That's right. When we overprotect, we deny our children the opportunity to learn to navigate and master dangerous situations themselves.
Right.
And so when our children don't have the confidence they need to face danger, they could actually become increasingly anxious about the world. They'll avoid opportunities to go out and experience all the world has to offer, or they might possibly fail to become independent as an adult due to things like anxiety, fear, or just a constant sense of second-guessing themselves. These things lead to a lack of proper perspective and practical experience when it comes to navigating danger.
Right. The Ulrichs report that the percentage of children experiencing anxiety has more than doubled in the past 20 years. And many things contribute to this increase, but a significant number of anxious kids are afraid of the world. And so the need of protection is not only to shield our kids from imminent danger that we might sense, but also to help them learn what they can do to protect themselves from danger when we aren't around, right? We want them to be cautious and confident, not fearful and anxious.
Right.
So meeting this need can be a bit tricky. But let's talk about what real danger looks like so that we're able to find that healthy place, that balanced place.
Yeah, for sure. A joint project that was done by the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, and Kaiser Permanente has given us some helpful insights into the effects of childhood traumatic events. The objective of this study was to identify the rates of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, ACE, right? And they wanted to determine how those events influenced people's physical and mental well-being over time. So the study identified 10 ACEs. They're emotional or physical abuse or neglect, sexual abuse, having a mother treated violently, so like witnessing domestic violence against your mom, having a household member who was a substance abuser or who was mentally ill, maybe depressed, or there was a suicide attempt by someone in the home. And a couple more are having a household member who was incarcerated or having parents who separated or divorced. These events are classified as adverse childhood experiences because they activate a person's stress response system, and often over a long period of time, right? It's not just like one single incident and we move on. This is happening over and over through childhood. Yeah.
Right. Now, when I read through that list, I kind of experienced a real sharp jolt of pain and some worry because I realized that my daughter Annika has experienced at least 6 of those ACEs. 6 out of 10. That's a lot of stress for a child to endure and navigate over their childhood.
Yep.
Now, the study suggests that about 2 in 3 people have had at least one adverse childhood experience, and 1 in 10 have had more than 4 of these. Now, it feels a bit overwhelming for me, honestly. My daughter, she's almost 27 now, and she's on a path of discovery and growth right now as she understands the impact of all of this. And she's learning how to navigate through the pain, and she's finding some healing.
Right.
And sadly, the majority of neglect and abuse she experienced happened during our painful season of parental alienation, and were at the hands of those who should have been trusted adults in her life. Now, we did our best to protect her and to reach out for professional help, but we just weren't realistically able to protect her from all that was happening in her other home. And early in her childhood, while I was still married to her dad, I struggled with depression and substance abuse issues as well. Now, all of that can stir up a lot of guilt in me. But instead of staying stuck in guilt, I continue to learn that I can choose to do something more productive and healthy.
That's right.
And thankfully, the Ulrichs have some powerful insights around how to honestly consider the list of adverse childhood experiences and take steps to face and overcome any challenges you might be experiencing when it comes to protecting your kids. And I'd encourage you to read this book and to also check out the episodes we've listed in the show notes if you've got real concerns about how to best protect your kids from harm, whether it's taking place in your home or in your kid's other home. Take the time to discover how you might take some appropriate action now to protect your kids.
That's right. And while it's true that Annika's had to navigate some really tough stuff, and maybe your kids have had to do the same thing,
right,
it's certainly not hopeless because their story isn't over. Listen to what the Ulrichs share about adverse childhood experiences. And this is important for those of us who've got kids who've been witness to our separation or our divorce. The Ulrichs say we cannot protect our children from all pain, but we can commit ourselves to fostering secure attachment relationships with them. This is the best immunization you can give your children for the pain that they're bound to experience sooner or later in life. What if you could experience a community that's all about healthy support, guidance, and practical strategies that help you thrive in your blended family? Well, now you can. Blending Together is a supportive community for blended family couples just like you.
We've educated and supported hundreds of couples navigating the unique challenges of blending a family. Now we're inviting you to join our community and experience the transformation that awaits you. But you'll need to act fast because we're getting started soon. Blending Together is not just another community. It's a place where you'll find practical, real-life strategies for building unity as a couple.
And creating more connection as a family.
Experiencing partnership in parenting.
And even dealing with that difficult ex.
Blending Together is a safe, growth-focused space where you get to connect with us and, maybe more importantly, with other blended family couples who truly understand what you're going through. Along the way, you'll discover practical tools, guidance, and hope that empower you to find a future full of confidence and connection.
When you join Blending Together, you'll get to hop into a variety of resources like access to our private Facebook group and online learning platform, monthly coaching meetings, monthly Q&As, and you'll even get to vote on the content for our monthly workshops.
Blending a family can often leave couples feeling alone or isolated and stuck, and quality support can sometimes be expensive. That's why we're offering you access to all of this at a super low monthly rate, because every blended family deserves the opportunity to thrive, regardless of their budget.
That's right. So join us in the Blending Together community and unlock the secrets to successful blending. Together, we can create a future filled with hope, connection, and peace. But don't wait. Click the link in the show notes now. The doors will be closing on October 8th, and you don't want to miss out on this unique opportunity to create the future you really want alongside other couples who genuinely get it. Hey, we can't wait to meet you there.
Right, and they go on to say that none of us want to acknowledge that pain for our kids is inevitable. We would rather do whatever possible to eliminate all potential pain. But ultimately, you will not succeed. And the cost of trying to eliminate all sources of pain for your child, rather than focusing on your relationship, may be even more detrimental to them in the long run than trying to protect them from experiencing any pain at all.
Wow, that's really insightful. And I believe that's what gives us so much hope for Annika. Right. And for our two mutual kids, Phoebe and Jacob, as
They've
well.
also experienced pain.
For sure. We might not have total control over what happens to our children, but we do have control over how we show up in meeting the need of protection. When we're open and available to our children when they've been hurt, we create pathways in their developing brains for grieving and recovering from pain with someone. That means like alongside them, right? They know they aren't alone in their pain. And so focusing on being present for kids will ultimately build up their resiliency against future pain and potential trauma. And our kids are going to need that when they're beyond our limited range of protection and out there navigating a world where we eventually do experience some deep life-altering pain. Most of us experience that somewhere along the way.
That's right. And that definitely gives me a sense of relief because, honey, we've intentionally done our best to create secure attachment with all three of our kids, imperfectly, of course.
Definitely.
And there's always room for improvement, even now that all of our kids are adults. But we don't want to gloss over the need to protect when there is a potential threat.
Right.
The Ulrichs say that the need for protection begins with taking seriously the threat of adverse childhood experiences and being willing to step between them and unsafe people. And it means educating our children about their rights to be safe how to identify unsafe people, how to protect themselves, and to always trust their instincts when it comes to other people.
Yeah. I love that, especially for the people who are listening right now, because there's such a wide group of us where our kids already have experienced a separation. They've already experienced a divorce, and that's one of those adverse childhood experiences.
Right.
But we also know of some other research that shows that when a new blended family is formed, and when that couple focuses well on their coupleness and creates a marriage that shows kids the value of relationship, and they can create a familyness environment that creates these attachments that the Ulrichs are talking about.
Yep, security.
That pain from that ace of divorce and separation actually can begin to be undone. This isn't a hopeless situation. So those of you who are listening, I want you to really hold on to that this is not the end of the story. Hold on to that. And when we can do all these things in the context of connection and a secure attachment relationship, we're not only protecting our kids from harm, but we're building up their emotional resiliency as well. We can actually be a buffer and also strengthen them to withstand the worst effects of pain. So we need to find a healthy balance between overprotection and underprotection.
Yeah, and I've been working on that for years. And if I can make imperfect progress on this one, so can anyone else listening today. You can do this.
For sure.
All right, let's move on to the next need, and that's comfort. Now, we just pointed out that our kids are going to experience pain in life, and comfort is how we enter into that pain, even when it's hard for us to relate to or painful for us to deal with.
Right.
Jeffrey Ulrich states his belief that comfort is the need he believes is most important out of all 6 of these. Comfort, yeah. That it's the need people find most personally painful and difficult to understand, so it's often skipped over or rushed through.
Wow. The Ulrichs go on to say that comfort is complicated and challenging to understand because comfort requires us to share in our children's pain, which is almost always uncomfortable for us.
Yeah.
And as I've come to realize as a person that likes to fix things, like when we meet the need of comfort for our kids, we've got to surrender ourselves to the fact that we just can't fix everything for them.
Right.
That's really hard for a lot of us to do.
Yeah, absolutely. None of us want to see our kids or stepkids experiencing pain or discomfort. And we often react by doing something to make it go away. Maybe we try to distract them from their pain, or we try to highlight the bright side of the situation. Maybe we try to convince our kids how they shouldn't be hurting at all, especially when their pain doesn't really make sense to us or maybe even seems frivolous.
Yeah.
Even when it's obviously important to them, it's not always all that important to us.
That's right, yeah.
And so we're often tempted to rush our kids and to just shake it off and quickly move past their pain. It can be really hard to simply sit in their pain with them, to be present and to offer comfort.
Yeah.
That's tough.
I know. I think about, when the kids were littler and they, maybe got a little bump or a bruise and really genuinely wasn't that big a deal. Remember, I used to kind of joke with them and kind of distract them and be like, oh, I guess we got to chop your arm off now, and then and we'd end up in some sort of humor and laughter or whatever.
Discount it.
Absolutely. And in those moments, I get it. Like that makes sense. We're trying not to make a mountain out of a molehill. It's really not a big injury, but, little kids tend to react that way. But when I look over history, how many times have I treated emotional pain that way with my kids?
Yeah.
And just tried to, laugh it off or distract them or tell them why they shouldn't feel the way they're feeling.
Right.
Man, I got to tell you how many times I'm so imperfect at this, but I've been working at it.
Yeah.
I've been really trying. And while there may be an appropriate time after a while to give our kids advice or do something about whatever that pain is, maybe even deal with correction, the first priority is actually to draw on our own strength, patience, and wisdom to help just calm and secure them, to be present with them and provide a place of warmth and safety. We meet the need of comfort by joining in our kids' suffering to offer refuge through their emotional storm until the way clears enough to find that path forward again.
Right.
Yeah.
And the research on this is clear. Providing our children with comfort is essential to their future functioning, and how a parent navigates comfort strongly shapes how a child will be able to navigate their own emotional life as they mature into an adult. So comfort is a universal human need.
Yeah. And in this chapter on comfort, the Ulrichs help us to understand a child's developing brain. They share how we all have two different brain systems that direct our behavior: the feeling or emotional brain and the thinking or rational brain.
Right.
You've probably heard about this kind of thing before. As humans, we all have those moments when our wants, fears, or emotions get the best of us. But as adults with supposedly fully developed brains, I don't know if I could always say that's true about me, we generally are able to maintain a balance between our feeling and our thinking brain.
Generally. This
isn't usually the case with our kids. Children are mainly driven by their feeling brain. So young humans start with plenty of capacity for processing the world emotionally, but actually are limited in their capacity for processing the world rationally. A child's capacity for information processing is underdeveloped because their thinking brain won't really reach full maturity until their early to mid-20s. And actually, it takes a dip in maturing during adolescence. So isn't it any wonder why middle school is so wacky?
Yeah, and is it any wonder why when you ask a teenager, what were you thinking? They might give you a blank stare, right? Because the honest answer to your question may be that they genuinely aren't thinking.
That's right.
But all of this is important for us to understand. Because of the imbalance in their brain, kids tend to get overtaken by their emotions simply because that's the part of their brain that's fully functional. And because their thinking brain is lacking development, they often aren't able to fully engage in a rational conversation about a difficult experience.
Right. The Ulrichs say that every parent needs to know that if your child is in a scales fully tipped to the feeling side of the brain position, no manner of words, no matter how well or loudly they're said, are going to make the situation better. Your wisdom and insights are literally inaccessible to your child's rational thinking brain. You're kind of wasting your breath, and you're likely only making things worse.
Right.
So while you might want your child to see things from a rational adult brain standpoint, they can't, because they are neither rational in that moment, nor do they have an adult brain to see things as an adult can see them.
So when our kids are experiencing storms of emotions, they need us to simply be present and to mirror back to them what we see by reflecting their point of view. This is what will ease their pain and help the storm to pass so that they can think rationally again and move forward. Reflecting or affirming a child's pain can help to lighten their emotional load, which eventually leaves them more open to processing what's going on in a rational way.
That's right. And, mirroring simply means to meet our kids where they're at, even when it's uncomfortable for us. We want to move toward the language of the feeling brain using things like tone, maybe touch, like putting an arm around them, facial expressions to kind of reach out to our kids. So we join them in their distress in a manner that doesn't resist it outright, but rather that sits alongside the suffering without pressure or impatience. We allow for silence when words can't be found. And we just try to focus on being with our kids while those waves of pain kind of pass over. We provide comfort and then ask questions when they're ready to help draw out the often hidden particulars of their pain.
Yeah.
We can value our child's emotional experience enough to see and name it through our child's eyes as best we can, like a mirror. It sounds like this. Hey, it looks like you're feeling sad. Is that right? Or, I can understand why you're really upset about this. Or even asking a question to dive deeper. Hey, can you tell me a little more about what's going on? I remember a time when our son, Jacob, he's our youngest, when he was around 9 or 10, this was quite a while ago. One evening after I got home from work, he came into our bedroom and asked if he could talk to me. He looked pretty serious, and so I said, "Sure, bud, what's going on?" Well, almost immediately he burst out into tears. Now, as mentioned a little earlier, I tend to be a fixer, and it can be easy for me to start jumping in with questions and seeking solutions. But in that moment, there was something in me that was able to slow down and recognize that wasn't what Jacob needed in the moment. So we sat on the bed for several minutes quietly while he just simply cried. I put my arm around him, and he kind of leaned in as the tears flowed. Finally, he was able to compose himself enough to share with me that one of his good friends told him that day at school that his parents were getting a divorce. Now, in that moment, Jacob was simply feeling bad for his friend, and he needed to process that. And what he needed from me was comfort. I couldn't fix his sadness, and he and I couldn't fix the situation for his friend. And ultimately, what he needed was comfort in a moment of pain. Right? So part of my fix-it mentality really could have kicked in and gone into distraction mode, just like I was talking about that physical pain from when they were little, trying to tell him why everything's going to be okay and he didn't need to be so upset. But I think I showed up actually pretty well for him at that time, and I offered some genuine comfort. I kind of hate to think about all the times that I didn't have the composure to show up that way over his lifetime. But I think in my imperfect parenting with Jacob, I have shown up enough times like that where I can just be present with him as he faces some really tough emotions. I've cried with him at different times along the way and simply offered comfort. It's in those moments that I have the presence of mind to just be with him, and that builds a secure attachment between us. He knows it's okay to just be himself with me and that I'm going to show up for him.
Yeah, such a good example. Now, as with all 6 of the needs, there are some times when we can get out of balance. Some parents might tend to be under-responsive and believe that if they overindulge in comfort with their children, the kids will become dependent on comfort from others when they're older. But the truth is quite the opposite. Giving generous attention to our kids' need for comfort will enable them, as they mature, to learn to comfort themselves in healthy ways. In fact, providing healthy comfort increases the chance that your child will be less emotionally needy and vulnerable to emotional storms as an adult, as well as less likely to engage in destructive forms of self-comfort. So rather than weakening them, giving comfort generously strengthens our kids.
Right. And sometimes we can become over-responsive when it comes to giving comfort as well, right? It might go the other direction. A parent might feel the need to just like reach out and grab the child and hold and soothe their child at the very first signs of minimal distress, whether the child asks for it or not. Or they may have trouble allowing their child to just kind of move on after a painful incident. They might be the ones revisiting it.
Yeah, they're hanging on to it.
Yeah. At some point, parents might question whether their comforting is doing more harm than good. We might question the authenticity of our children's expressions of pain and become suspicious, right? If we're over-responsive with comfort, they might be seeking that all the time in an unhealthy way for themselves. And this is something that kind of comes up with blended families sometimes. And we see it from 2 different perspectives. Makes me think about that Heather Hetchler quote of a parent sees their child through the eyes of love first, and a step-parent sees that same child through the lens of responsibility first, right? And so sometimes a step-parent is observing their spouse offering a child comfort, and they might accuse them of, babying them or kind of getting played by the child or manipulated by their own kids.
Yeah.
And that can be a really challenging place for then us as a couple to work through. I know I've seen that in you. That's been my lens for you sometimes along the way with Annika.
Yeah, this can get really confusing for both bio and step parents. And thankfully, the Ulrichs offer some practical tips and insights around understanding specific situations when comfort might not be helpful. And again, we encourage you to get this book and discover how you can find a healthy balance of meeting the need of comfort for your kids and stepkids. It's just so important. And we don't have to get it right every time or be perfect. We just need to be aware in those moments when our kids are hurting and be present for them in their suffering.
That's right. All right. Let's keep going and get to the final need, which is equipping. We need to understand that offering comfort without equipping, that might settle our kids down emotionally in the moment, but it won't prepare them for the next time that they run into a similar unsettling situation in life. And jumping straight to equipping without first offering some comfort is actually likely going to result in some empty words that kids could reject or struggle to make sense of, simply because of their lingering emotions. Remember, they're in that emotion side of their brain rather than the rational side. So when we jump into fix-it mode or offer kids our great wisdom and advice right out of the gate, and then later we're scratching our heads wondering why our kids didn't listen to that great wisdom and advice, it could be that we just simply skipped out on the comfort.
Right. And not only do our kids have big feelings, but they've also got some big thoughts which feed and fuel their emotions. Sometimes these thoughts are irrational, confusing, or misinformed.
Sure.
We all have emotions and thoughts when something painful happens.
And of course, there are those thoughts and emotions of the people around us and our kids, like friends, teachers, other family members, all kinds of people around us. And those naturally drive how they might behave toward us.
Right.
So finally, there's this question of, well, what the heck do I do? Like, where do I go from here?
All this information, our feelings and thoughts, as well as the feelings and thoughts of those around us, is tough for even adults to navigate. And it's especially hard for a child struggling to make sense of their emotionally difficult and troubling experiences.
Yeah.
And the truth is, our kids need our help. That's where equipping comes in.
That's right. The Ulrichs say that the practice of moving past storms together helps our children understand how their minds work, to read others more accurately and make wise life choices. When we embrace the need for equipping in our children, we strengthen them. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that sounds amazing, right? I think a lot of us wish that we've been equipped by our parents to do exactly this, right?
Right.
But what does equipping actually look like?
Well, I'm so glad you asked that, honey. In their book, the Ulrichs offer a 3-step process of equipping, which are emotions, thoughts, and actions.
Great.
Now, we don't have time today to do a deep dive of these steps, but in essence, these steps help our children to identify their emotions and map out the thoughts that go along with the emotions, and then build an action plan to move forward. In doing this, we equip them to understand themselves and also understand others. We teach our kids how to make sense of powerful experiences that are confusing and, at times, scary. And most of all, we communicate to them that they are not alone or abnormal, and that everyone, including grown-ups, have intense feelings and irrational thoughts sometimes.
That's right. Now let's talk about that last step of action for a moment. I'm really good at coming up with action plans.
You are.
At least I think I am some of the time. But this is not about telling our kids what to do and how to do it. It's about helping them discover appropriate solutions, appropriate action steps. Yeah. And sometimes this is where we get stuck as parents and step-parents. Because if the troubling experience had to do with something that our child did, like a mistake they made or something inappropriate that contributed to the situation or caused that pain to themselves or someone else, often our first instinct is to just jump into discipline mode and impose consequences, right? But if we want to equip our children for how they'll navigate future mishaps in life and repair relationships, we need to teach our kids how to make things right. We can do this by inviting them into a conversation where we brainstorm together different options. We want to allow them to take responsibility for their actions before just jumping straight to discipline. You might actually be surprised at the ideas your child comes up with in order to make things right.
And, you know, there are times when consequences are needed. And when that's the case, think in terms of natural consequences as much as possible. But with many emotional experiences, when consequences aren't needed, we want to focus on working with our children to imagine a path that helps them regain hope and move ahead. The goal is to help them try out different options of what's next and offer your support along the way. Now, we know it sounds like comfort and equipping are going to take a lot of extra time and energy. And it's true, it does take some effort. But we encourage you to be open to the task of equipping and don't let it overwhelm you.
Yeah.
Remember, it's your presence that matters to your child more than anything.
Right.
So you don't have to have all the right answers. It's all right. Just stay curious and keep showing up.
That's true. If I go back to my story with Jacob, when, I was just trying to be there for him, once he was able to cry for a while and then share a bit more about what was going on for him emotionally, we ended up having a conversation where I was able to ask him things like what was bothering him most about his friend's situation. And he was able to express that. We talked about how he felt sad for his friend. We talked about how he was worried that his friend was going to have to move out of the neighborhood. We talked about that he even had some fears about our family and what happens if you and mom get really mad and get a divorce, right? He was worried about us, honey. And then when it came time, we talked about how it's okay that he was sad. And we talked about what he might do if he feels sad again later. Like, talk to me again. Or reach out to you, hon, and talk to you. And we discussed how he might even talk to his friend and really show up well for him.
Yeah.
And not try to give him advice, but just be a good friend.
Yeah.
So we were really beginning to work toward those action plans of how he could take this hurt and move forward from it.
Yeah. It answers that question. Where do I go from here?
Right.
Yeah. That also reminds me of a parenting situation we had with Phoebe. At school. It wasn't a bullying situation, but there were some girls that were being really unkind to her.
Yeah, kind of picking on her a little.
Yeah, these were girls that she'd known for years. And at this point, for some reason, they kind of formed a little clique and left her out. And she felt very excluded.
Yeah.
And thought that they were, whispering and telling secrets about her. She was very emotionally upset. And so we sat her down. We did the comfort part. After that, we sat her down and talked about, well, what do you think you can do in this situation at school? Now, an overprotective parent would have said, oh, that's it. We're going to homeschool this kid, or, oh, let's move her to a different classroom, or, we could have gone into overprotection mode. We didn't, thankfully. And we talked about, some steps forward. And Phoebe thought, okay, well, maybe I could talk to the teacher about it. And we're like, oh, that's a great idea. How do you need our support? And she said, well, it'd be great if you could come with me to talk to the teacher. And we made it very clear, oh, we're happy to be there and support you, but this is going to be your meeting with the teacher.
That's right.
You need to be the one in charge of this meeting. And we were really proud of her. She actually was able to articulate what was going on. And then she and the teacher brainstormed possible solutions in the classroom of how they could make things better for Phoebe. And they actually put that action plan into place. Yeah.
Good. And I remember, we actually told the teacher ahead of time too. We said, hey, Phoebe's got a concern. And we're going to come to this meeting, but it's her meeting.
Yeah.
And we really let her step up into that leadership role.
It really empowered her.
Yeah, that's a great example.
And it set her up for future problems. Of course, she's going to feel left out in the future.
Yeah.
And we're not always going to be there. Right. And so how can she learn to take care of herself and protect herself in really difficult situations in life? Because we're all going to have them as adults too, right?
And all that, right, it's smack dab in the middle of a lot of imperfect parenting on both of our parts, right? We're telling some success stories, but we could probably turn it around and tell some failure stories,
like
too.
I said, there have been times when I've jumped straight to overprotection.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when you come out of those moments of meeting the need of comfort in a child, watch for opportunities to fill that need of equipping right on the tail end of it without taking over. Without trying to fix it or fix them,
right?
We want to come alongside to help them to move forward. Now, we can tell you that as you practice meeting these needs, it does become more natural. You will grow as a parent. You will grow as a step parent. But as one of my friends, Mark Warren, often says, knowledge changes your thinking, but practice changes your life. So you actually have to get after it. You have to practice it and really be thoughtful about the way that you're stepping forward. And as you explore how to be imperfectly present, your connection will grow with your kids and your stepkids.
Absolutely.
Right? If you really do that intentionally.
So hopefully we've given you a digestible introduction of these 6 needs that every child has and some insight into the importance of developing a secure attachment with your kids and stepkids. In our last episode, number 142, we talked about every child's instinct to explore the world around them and the 3 needs of delight, support, and boundaries. And today we talked about every child's instinct to seek refuge from a trusted caregiver and the 3 needs of comfort, protection, and equipping.
Sure. And as you process all this, remember that you don't have to be a perfect parent or step-parent. You really just need to be present. And as you move forward, have the courage to explore new ways to respond to your kids and stepkids, which will ultimately open up new pathways of relating and connecting with them.
Yes, absolutely. The Ulrichs say that the secret to a secure relationship is not that there are no fractures, mistakes, misunderstandings, hurt feelings, or wrong turns.
Whew, thank goodness.
The secret to a secure relationship is for parents and children to face those fractures and wrong turns head on together. Mistakes and missteps are not the measure of your parenting or your child. Those are inevitable and unavoidable. It's your willingness and ability to repair and reconnect after difficulty that demonstrates the strengths of your relationship. I love that. The gift of secure attachment comes about through returning to each other over and over again, even and especially when things get hard.
So good. The reality is we've all experienced hard things in our parenting journey and in our blended family journey, right?
Oh, yeah.
And if you've been listening to this 2-part series, you might be thinking, well, this is great, Mike and Kim, and what an awesome resource you've shared. And yes, of course, I want to meet the needs of my kids and stepkids. I want to raise confident, resilient kids and grow our connections. And yes, I'm willing to make the paradigm shift from treating parenting as a job, and I'm ready to embrace parenting as a journey. But I've got some challenges that will probably get in the way of me being able to make that a reality.
Yeah. Maybe you aren't sure exactly when or how to use these 6 needs as a practical tool when you're faced with a tough parenting moment. Or maybe you feel like you're pretty good at meeting some of these needs, but you really struggle with a few of these. They just don't come naturally for you. So even though you're ready to implement what you've learned, you might still be wondering how you're going to make that happen.
Yeah. I mean, along the way, I think we're all wondering that to some extent because parenting and step-parenting can be really challenging.
Yeah.
But we've got some exciting news that might help. Next week, we're going to be sharing an interview that we actually had with Jeffrey and Amy Ulrich.
Woohoo!
We asked them to join us here on the show and explain how we might use the compass of needs that they've developed and that they feature in their book, especially when we're feeling stuck. What makes that compass a practical tool? We talk a little bit about that with them. And how can we use it to maximize what we've learned about the 6 needs?
We also asked them to explore why and how the natural tendencies of a parent or step-parent might cause them to either under-respond or over-respond in different situations with their child or stepchild. And of course, we asked, how can all of us move towards a healthy balance and overcome some of the challenges we might experience? And they'll share their own parenting challenges as well when it comes to meeting these 6 needs with their 3 boys.
Yeah, I love their vulnerability. It's really great. And we're excited because Jeffrey, who's worked with children and families for over 20 years now as a clinical psychologist, has quite a bit of experience working with both kids and adults living in blended family dynamics. So he's going to share some really helpful tips specifically for us in blended families.
Yep, and his wife, Amy, she's articulate, she's open, and she shares from her heart parts of her journey, and you don't want to miss this episode.
That's right.
You really don't.
So be sure to join us for that interview next week as we wrap up today. Don't forget to leave us a rating on whatever app you might be listening on. We really appreciate your feedback. But that's going to make this episode a wrap.
Until next time.